Hi, welcome to Wild Woman Wednesday. I'm Laura.
And I'm Ferrah.
Hi, Ferrah.
Hey. Hey,
So,
Laura.
so today we're talking about sober curious. So we're going to dive into some questions about, how do you know when it's time to take a break? How do you communicate with others about your boundaries around alcohol? What are some benefits? What are some fears? And just in general, how to navigate. And like all our other episodes, you and I have very diverse experiences. So I'm super stoked to dive into that today with you. Thanks for joining me.
Yes. Well, and I know that this is a topic I think that is extremely important, especially with this month being Recovery Month, as an opportunity. And I think during the pandemic, there's a lot of people that were like, maybe I should take a break from alcohol. And when there was an opportunity for us to stay at home and there's nowhere to go, so why not have a cocktail or a glass of wine or a few? I think it was a chance for a lot of people to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol and how they wanted to approach it from a more intentional point of view, which is definitely something that over time I have come to terms with, but definitely had a long road with drinking. So I was like, that sounds bad, but it is kind of bad. So I'm excited to talk about it and just to be able to put it all out there. As we do every week on Wild Women Wednesdays, we speak the truth and hopefully be able to help others gain a little bit of insight with our honesty and authenticity.
So where should we start? Where should we start? You have told me before, Farah, about sober curiosity. So what is your experience with that? When do you know? What are the parameters around how to know you need to take a break?
Yeah. My personal practice that I do on a yearly basis is to take a month off. It's February, so don't give me too much credit because it is the
28 days.
shortest month of the year. I've been doing this for years, honestly, for as long as I can remember. Maybe even like maybe 6 or 7, maybe 8 years. It's been a long time. It's been definitely something that I incorporated once I actually started reducing how much I was drinking. I recognized that it was negatively affecting my relationships, and also I'm sassy all the time, but I am especially sassy. I'm especially sassy when I've had a couple cocktails and I am already pissed off about something, which I think, it lowers inhibitions and kind of reveals what's kind of going on under the surface. And so I started having run-ins with my ex-husband. We were together for 12 years and partied together on a regular basis. And so I was going through yoga teacher training and I recognized that it was too much of a habit. It was something that I was consistently doing all the time. And I remember looking at him and I was like, we should take a month off. Like, let's just not drink for a month. And he was like, you know what? I'm up for it. And I was like, cool. So it was something that we did together and then we could support each other in, which I think was a really good bonding thing for us to do as a couple. And then it just became a regular thing that we did each year. But outside of that, I've definitely taken breaks. Other than that, obviously, while I was pregnant, I wasn't drinking or doing anything. While I was breastfeeding, drastically reduced. I maybe would have a glass of wine every once in a while, but it was still pretty low. And so I've kind of gone through lots of sober stints. But I do enjoy having a cocktail or a glass of wine. So I really just had to evaluate what my relationship with it was, what my relationship was with it, if I was doing it in moderation, and to really just keep the reins in to make sure that it was something that was enhancing my life instead of taking away from it. What about you, Laura? You are actually sober, completely sober. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I have been sober for 3.5 years. And yeah, I don't think I ever, like, there's no plan. There was no, well, maybe let's do a month. Maybe it's do, oh, we've hit a year. Maybe that's good enough. Or, so time just kind of kept ticking by and it just didn't seem like a good idea to pick it back up again. And I really, decided I just kind of got tired of my own shit. That sounds awful, but and by that I just mean it seemed to be a good excuse to just not be fully present and fully living my life. It was an easy thing to just, have social plans that centered around alcohol. It didn't really matter who I got to agree to come have a drink with me, as long as we were going to go out. Or, the day's stressful, so let's have 2 beers after work. Well, that kind of just turned into every day. And, I just didn't like how it was enabling me to just be passenger in my own life. So uh, I had heard about this book by Annie Grace called This Naked Mind on another podcast. A guest on the Armchair Expert podcast had shared his experience of, he had all these plans for a bunch of people to come over for dinner. So he opened this nice bottle of wine, he started drinking it, then the plans got canceled, and he's like, well, it's open, let's not waste it. And so his was a subtle realization as well. And so he read this book, and which really highlights about the just the romanticization of alcohol culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just really encouraged all the different ways. So anyway, so I ended up listening to it, and I recommend listening to it on Audible, because there's a lot of repetition. And I think when you read something, it's a little bit slower to digest, but when you listen to it, it's kind of sinks in there to your subconscious. But and she gives you permission not to just quit drinking on day one. It was like, don't quit drinking. I wouldn't want you to do that. And so but as you continue to listen to content and you start recognizing your behavior, recognizing how you're influenced by the media, how you're influenced by the hand towels that you bought that says wine o'clock on them, or it's 5 o'clock somewhere, or mommy juice. So you're influenced in all these ways. You start to then realize that you want control over that. And, or at least that was my realization. And, so it was easy that day on March 30th to have one half of a last beer and not enjoy it, and decide that's not what I want to be doing anymore. And it's just really been trial and error and a journey. The only rule is don't have an alcoholic beverage. Simple enough rule to follow.
Truly. And it seems simple, but I'm sure it can be difficult at times, because I think that it becomes such a habit, such a coping skill that people use in order to deal with stress, that it becomes a go-to, I think, for a lot of people. And I think that that's usually when it tends to get a little dangerous, and when things start to teeter on alcoholism. Let's be honest, call it as it is. Is there still moments where you feel like you want to have a drink?
Yeah, I think not so much any longer out of a coping mechanism or out of stress, but in celebration, or going with the flow and having fun. It's so funny. I think this is the weirdest thing, but the most often when I feel like this, I want to have a drink, is watching chick flicks, like movies where a bunch of gals are hanging out, having a really great time together, and they're drinking like wine. And I'm like, I want to join. It's a movie, but come on, there's some pull there that's like, oh, I want to join in on this fun and this celebration. I mean, totally weird thing to associate with, but I think that
No, I don't think at all.
breeds feelings of missing out. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What are some challenges in in February?
In my February, I am very much a social drinker. So I think that was drinking. I've never been one to really drink by myself. I think also I have extreme alcoholism and drug addiction in my family. It runs rampant, and it's ruined multiple people's lives, to be perfectly honest. It's something that I grew up watching. And it was always a topic of conversation within my family, because I saw people, really disintegrate from it. Obviously, things a lot more hardcore like meth and heroin, but still, nonetheless, it was very much a negative effect. So I think for me, drugs in general, I always saw that, and I saw that very young, that I never had any desire to do anything along those lines, just because I saw how much it ruined people's lives. But and families, it was my aunts and uncles, and they had children. So as you can imagine, it was heartbreaking. And even as a young kid, I saw that and recognized what was going on. So for me, that was never the case. But I did, like you said, it is popular in our culture. It is talked about in songs. I started drinking when I was pretty young. I was in junior high. I remember I was hanging out with some older guys, and they were all drinking, and I was like, oh yeah. And I was with my girlfriends. I was like, oh yeah, obviously, we're all drinking. We drink. Yeah, we drink,
Yeah.
And
That'd be
I did
cool.
not. Yeah, it was like totally to be cool at that point. And then I like learned how to drink from I laugh only because if they were to watch this, they know who they are. They were probably the biggest partiers in our high school. And so when I was young, those are the guys that I hung out with. We went out and I became like one of the girls that would be able to meet up and, you know, have a good time with them. And so I started binge drinking very young. And I think that that was kind of what I created around it. That was kind of my expectation of why you do drink. And those are a lot of the examples of what I saw in movies. And, you know, think of like, what was it? What's that one? Uh, the bachelor party in Vegas,
The
where the guys,
Hangover.
the Hangover. Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
that was like a huge movie and they
Yeah.
all get roofied. Like if
Yeah.
you think about what really happened there, it's really fucked up. And so, and this is something that we just like deem as acceptable within our culture.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I definitely saw the dark and the light in it. Like I definitely saw a lot of, you know, fucked up things happen to friends and situations. So then I kind of started to get a little bit more wise up to what was going on. And also to just be smart and, you know, buddy system and all of that. But I think for me, it was always very social, I guess is the summary of all of this. And so I would definitely, I think when we would go out or if like, you know, and I think with my partner, like at the time, like we drank a lot together. And so it was, I think what I like, I think it would have been a lot harder. Well, towards the end, he stopped wanting to take the breaks and I was just the one that was doing it. So I think even then I started to recognize I could do it on my own. I didn't necessarily need like a cheerleader in it.
Yeah.
And that was just something that was important to me and that I wanted to pursue because I think it gave me the opportunity to reevaluate you know, why was I picking up a drink? And was it something I was automatically doing like you at the end of the day? You know, I wrap up work and I pour myself a glass of wine. Like, do I need to have a glass of wine or is this just become something I'm accustomed to? So I think, but going out with friends, I think is still one that I'm like, all right, ladies, we're getting together, shots, you know, like that comes out of my mouth. So
Yeah.
like I do like to have a drink. I enjoy having a drink, but more often than not, well, actually, if I am having a bad day, I will not allow myself to drink. So
Oh,
those,
yeah.
because I recognize that if I'm doing that, I'm doing it to numb. And if I'm trying to numb from something, then there's probably a reason why, and I probably need to feel it. And so I will consciously not drink in those moments because I recognize that I'm trying to run away instead of
Mm.
really lean into whatever's occurring in my life. And pain and discomfort are stimuli that is designed in order to catch our attention. So when we try to dismiss it or ignore it, it only gets louder. So I've made a very conscious effort to not drink in those moments.
Mm.
But then when I am in the mood, or if it's a celebration, or if I'm with some good friends, I think especially people I knew when I was younger, when I used to party a lot more, I am so inclined to have a few, maybe a few too many. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like habit, right? Like
Mhm.
the back in that yeah, that group where that's what you did. So it's maybe even mindless habit.
Mhm. Well, and you know, cognitive behavioral therapy. So I actually used to work within addiction for a period of time. It was for 1-800 Quit Now, so it's helping people quit smoking cigarettes. But at the same time, I think the same principles apply pretty much to any drug use or really any habit you want to eliminate from your life. And it's about finding out where your triggers are. When do you do whatever chosen action and replacing it with something else? And that way, when you're in the situation, you're kind of prepared for it. And we'll talk more about this and like kind of some tips and tricks on how to kind of adjust your routine or even how to handle these situations when they come up. But I think for me, I do. Yeah, it's not mindless. I'm very intentional when I do drink, and I'm very much like, what is? I literally will look at my girlfriends and be like, what kind of night are we trying to have? And I'll look at them. We'll talk about it. Like, are we going to bed early tonight? Are we having one? Or like, am I going to end up on our table dancing? I'm just wondering where this night is going to go.
Where's everyone else's head at? Because you could
Where's
adapt.
it? Because I can adapt to like the bed. And I also tap into myself, like, what do I want? What am I in the mood for? And you know, I have my daughter part-time, so every like 50, if not more percent of the time, I'm unable to even, and I don't drink by myself. So if I'm at home, like, you know, at the end of the day, I don't even have alcohol in my house. So I wouldn't be having a drink. And so it's really mostly when I design the situation to be like, hey, I'm meeting up with some people. You guys want to have a cocktail? Yep. Okay, cool. That's what we're doing. But I also see them outside of that too. But that is like, I definitely have a crew that I get together when I'm in the mood for it. I know that I'm actually only because I can see Laura's face.
I'm not
Because
judging. I'm not judging. I'm just
you
missing
are
out.
judging. You are there was an ounce of judgment.
No, it was a FOMO moment, a fear of missing out moment of like, oh, I missed that. But that's okay.
Well, and that was my projection onto you to be like, am I getting judged right now? Which fine, it's fine with me. But I do understand because, well, and what you just described was like the moments where you do want to have a drink is when you're with your girlfriends hanging out and you just want to be able to have a glass of wine. And you can still be present in those moments. I think even if I were to go out with my girlfriends and not drink or anything like that and just still be in the environment, I think that would be fine. And obviously I've done that before. And I think I would be fine in that, but I think it would be difficult. I think that probably would be the most challenging part for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that like cut loose type of feeling. But I think,
Mhm.
there's different ways to embody that, right?
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
it's really like intentional, like you said, and state of mind.
Mhm, mhm. And I think state of mind makes such a huge difference, and just to be able to make sure that it's a positive experience as a whole, and I think that there's a lot of, I've seen a lot of times nights go wrong too, because of booze, and so it's like, I've definitely seen both, and I think that that's why at this point I am so conscious and aware of it because I've seen the positives and a lot of negatives too. And I think that that's, we're going to talk about next is like, when is a break not a break? And like,
Hmm.
when is it time to just stop? And I feel like, at least for like, I don't know if I've ever been in this spot, but I have definitely had little inklings of it is like, what if I'm drinking and every single time I'm blacking out? I think that there is an opportunity where like, all right, well, I obviously can't limit myself. I'm
Hmm.
going to the extreme and I'm also putting myself in dangerous situations. Like I think that there is definitely an opportunity there for self-evaluation and to be able to make a shift. And I think taking a break or even taking an extended break that might enter into sobriety, I think is very much opportunity. I have one of my good friends, she said, I blacked out a few times, drove home and that was really fucking stupid. And I have extreme anxiety afterwards, which I think sometimes we forget that, alcohol is a depressant, and the Sunday scaries is actually just your body's withdrawal from alcohol, and it invokes extreme anxiety in people. And so I think for some, if you're having these adverse effects, it's like maybe it's just not a part of your lifestyle, and it's not conducive for you having a healthy, happy life. And I think that those are an opportunity to really evaluate why you're doing it and if it's really essential in your life or not. What would you say? When would you technically deem it not a break and really just like a lifestyle shift?
What, there's, and this is another question we can talk about, but there's fear of saying it is indefinite and forever. Like there's a
Mm,
wall there. Like I don't want to say it's forever because if you say it's forever, it feels maybe not possible. So or harder thing to
mm,
achieve. So let me just be honest, a little fear there. But
mm,
so there's a barrier to answer your question for sure, because it's like, when is a break not a break? Well, 3.5 years. So was it a coffee break? Was it 10 minutes? So,
yeah.
but I
I
like
know.
what you said a lot about like intentional living around, recognizing that anxiety too. So if you're like trying to take the edge off, or,
Mhm,
you find that you're anxious and you want to, um, numb that or avoid that feeling, it's like maybe a break would be great. And you evaluate your life, like what choices are you
mhm,
making, what life did you build for yourself, is this really the path you want to be on? And
mhm,
that's something wonderful about getting rid of drinking for me, is that I really wanted to be more intentional about what is present. And so, what will be the indicators that it's okay to drink again? I mean, that is, I have no idea. So, I'm not quite sure we could answer that question today at all, other than just to check in and learn tools that help you cope, uh, to de-stress, to think about what you really want, be intentional, um, and answer the question for yourself, right?
Yeah. Because I think that what people need and what people need to do for themselves is it's variable on what's going on in
Right.
their life and the circumstances that they're experiencing in that moment, as well as maybe even some, childhood, programming that they've received as they've been raised around alcohol or drugs in general. And I think cutting it out and taking a break, I'm very present oriented person, or at least I try to be a very present oriented person. And I think, like you said, there's some fear of like, oh, I'm never going to have a drink again. And it's like, well, if I want to, like I'm a big, like, I do what I want. I don't really like to be told what to do. And so when if something's too absolute, it's like kind of freaks me out a little bit. So for me, it's like, well, I'll like at this point in time, I don't want to. But that might change. And I'm going to be compassionate to myself and be willing to, be able to make those shifts when the time comes. And, I've taken breaks from other things. I've smoked weed at different times in my life, and I've definitely taken long extended breaks from that and then started again. And then at this point, I don't really want to anymore. And so then it was just kind of a moment where I was like, I just don't like doing it anymore. And why was I doing it? And was it just a coping skill, or was it a habit? And how do I feel on it? And do I enjoy it? Do I like it? What's the benefit? What is it? And what is it actually bringing into my life? And I think with any drug, that can be an opportunity for someone to like really look at it and to, really see if it's actually something that's, contributing to your well-being, or is it depreciating your well-being? And I think that that's a really honest conversation that only someone can know and understand for their own personal experience. What do you think some of the benefits of taking a break? I guess we've kind of touched on that, but is there anything else that you feel like might be encourage someone to take a little bit of a hiatus?
Um, I like to tell people that the number one benefit for me for stepping away from drinking is that I have been much more like on a path of self-reflection and introspection. And all I can say is that like it didn't answer any questions, it didn't change anything, but it sure as shit unfogged the mirror. So when you want to truly look inside yourself and figure out what's going on, at least I don't have that barrier now. That there's this extra layer of fog on my mirror. So that's it doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes a difference. So that's a big benefit for friends of mine who we've chatted a little bit about like, hey, maybe let's take a break. It's much to your story at the beginning about having increased confrontations with their partner, or really being indecisive too, like, oh, there's so much going on. I feel a sense of overwhelm and indecision, and it's like, okay, well, let's remove this one thing that clouds that and numbs that and keeps you from being able to really tap into your intuition. So those are the times I don't go in and preach CrossFit, so to speak, to everybody about stop drinking, but that's when I say, oh, maybe that's the indicator that you might want to take a break. Oh, what about you? Any other benefits?
Like I said, I think it, like you were just describing, it detoxifies your system. It regulates your nervous system as well, and your hormones, which I think sugar can also spike and drop our hormone levels. And so I think taking that out of the equation kind of normalizes someone a little bit more. And like you said, like really understanding like, why do I feel the way I feel, and taking out a drug, a substance out of the equation helps to understand what your baseline is and what you're working from, and hopefully to be able to maybe even go deeper into what's actually going on for that person. And I know that when I was going through yoga teacher training, and I really just started to recognize like one, I had social anxiety and I was kind of unhappy in certain areas of my life. And when I'm unhappy, or at least before when I was really unhappy, I would drink more. I think a lot of people do. And
Mhm.
why did I do that? Because I didn't want to feel the pain inside of me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to forget about it. And I think that's also why I'm so anti-drinking when I am upset, because I know that, and the thought still crosses my mind of
Yeah.
like, I'm having a bad day or I'm just like pushed to my max and I'm like, I need a fucking drink, and like that phrase is a signal to me that I don't need a drink and that I need to do something else to help balance me out and to help calm me, because I'm obviously overwhelmed and stressed. And so if that's taking a bath, if that's going for a walk, deep breathing, doing yoga, or even just like calling a friend and venting or setting up an appointment with my therapist, whatever, what have you, like whatever that is. And that moment, I at least I stop, I breathe, I recognize what trigger I'm experiencing. I recognize what my likely habit is that I would fall into if I wasn't going to take this in a more conscious route. And then I change the behavior. And, that is cognitive behavioral therapy, like I was describing earlier. And I think once you recognize that, once you see it, once you identify it, then you have the opportunity to change it. And I think then once you are able to change it, then it becomes more like you got to kind of deepen the grooves of your brain and the neural pathways that have already been established. If you want to switch those, it's going to take time. It's definitely not going to
Yeah.
happen overnight. And this has been going on. I stopped drinking as much as I used to. I was like 26, so almost 10 years ago. Not thinking about it, I actually didn't even realize how long it had been. I definitely still dabbled. I've still drank the entire time, but I definitely haven't. When I was younger, I drank a lot, like especially college. I think college is one of those times where people just deem alcoholism as normal,
Yeah.
and people are out every night. If not, let's be honest. It was like Tuesday through Thursday, and then break on Friday, and then like Saturday night, and then break Monday and Sunday, Monday. That's more than 50% of the week I was going out and drinking. And
I mean,
all of my
it's
friends
Taco
were
Tuesday, it's Whiskey
exactly
Wednesday, it's Thirsty Thursday.
reggae
It's
night. Yeah,
mhm.
there's something, and then everyone would be going out, and you're like, oh, we all have to go out. I could speak of the ones. Was it Thursday night was at the Nightlight in Bellingham. Reggae night Wednesdays. They had reggae night at Boundary Bay IPA, and they had like reggae bands on Wednesday nights. Um, it was definitely the Nightlight every Thursday. Saturday, you just go out, or there would be house parties that we go to. There was always something on Tuesday, and I think it was in Fairhaven. Anyway, so the fact that I even still remember those are so ingrained in my brain of like where I was going on those nights. And it
I
would
love
start with,
that. Like your school had like reggae night. We had theology on tap, which meant you went and sat with a Jesuit priest at a bar drinking. Like,
what?
yeah. So, okay, continue because I'm just saying we do it over here too with the Irish Catholics.
My best friends were Irish Catholic, and I grew up, and that is who I first started drinking with. And we used to get down. I love those girls till the end of time,
I think
because
they
they
ended
were
up in
always,
school with me.
yeah, they were at Gonzaga. Zags, go Zags. I used to visit every year. And we knew what we were doing when we were there. And so and I love those girls, and they are very, I think that's why at the end, people can get away with drinking a lot and still running a functional life. There's a functional alcoholism is a very common thing. And not to say that we were alcoholics at the time, but I think that we teetered along that line and definitely showed like exemplified characteristics of someone who was abusing alcohol. And we were still getting good grades. I've always still had a job. I always took care of myself. I've always been very independent. But that was my dad's kind of upbringing of like, you can have freedom, but you need to take care of your shit. And so then when I was younger, I was like, okay, I can do whatever I want as long as I get good grades. I don't get in trouble at school. I don't get in trouble with the law. And I'm doing extracurriculars, and I get into college, and I still support myself. And like really anything I spend my money on, rent's covered. My dad's paying the mortgage. Actually, my dad paid off the mortgage early, but he like was covering everything else. So I was like, then I have my freedom, and I think that that's carried on throughout my life to be, as long as I have everything in order and that my life is working, and I am on top of it, then I can do what I want. But then I have to understand what am I doing and why do I want to do it? And so it's like, just because you haven't had a rock bottom doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be an opportunity to reevaluate. And we're going into college, but like also then back then, you know, we were drinking a bottle of tequila, at least a pint of tequila every night. We'd start off with shots. We drink a bottle of wine before we left.
Right. Okay.
Before we left.
Making me nauseous over here.
Oh, it's making me nauseous thinking about it. And so I think about that and like, but that's again, these are programs, these are things that I learned. These were very social norms that I experienced. And and I wasn't hanging out with deadbeats, to say the least. All of the people I was with were very driven, successful individuals, and so are to this day. And so it was never a point of concern. But looking back on it, I had to be honest with myself about why I was doing it. And that's, probably one of the first times I took a legit break, and also was like, I don't want to. It's not that I'm concerned about myself. I just don't want to do it anymore. And I want to stop living that lifestyle. And once I shifted that, my nervous system regulated. I was, I had less anxiety. I was struggling less with depression, actually liked myself. I was able to do self-discovery. I was able to go down that journey and really tap into my spirituality. And so it was an opportunity for me to really get clear on who I was and who I wanted to be. And I think that if someone's, kind of struggling with that or wanting to explore that, having a little bit of a break of sobriety, I think can be a really excellent tool in order to do so.
Well, what about some fears around taking a break? So when you're deciding to do, a month, or even how about transitioning those social relationships where you were drinking heavily, how did you navigate maybe some fears, or did you have any fears?
I think back in the day when I first probably did this, I probably was a little nervous about well, if I go meet up with them, am I not going to drink? Am I going to be Debbie Downer because I'm not having a cocktail or a margarita with everyone else? And but then that was also a time where I was really experiencing a lot of presence and really exploring that in my life. And so I was like, you know what? I can't worry about this. We'll just see how it goes. And I was pleasantly surprised with most of my friends that were really supportive of it and that were like, oh, that's cool. No big deal, and it was just kind of move along. And I think I created a lot of stories around my head around it. But in actuality, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then I think towards the end within relationships, if people weren't on board or if they did give me shit about it or flack, I would be like, okay, but I also I try to not let others' opinions about what I'm doing affect me and how I feel about myself, because for too long, I found all of my worth in other people's opinions. And I remember there was an affirmation I said to myself for years that was my worthiness is not dependent on other people's view of me. And that's because that's always something I really struggled with. And so I think that, yeah, probably at different points in time, there's been different moments of concern and worries about it. But I think at this point in my life, when I want to cut something out, I'll just say I'm not really in the mood, and people are like, oh, okay, and we're older now too. So it's not and maybe, but even now, you don't drink wine every night. You don't
Mommy
you don't
juice?
have yeah, you don't have it as a mom, how do you survive without drinking every night? And I try not to judge, but I'm well, I personally think that's a little concerning if you're drinking every night, but to each their own. I'm not here to mom shame by any means. I hate mom shaming. I don't like using the word hate, but I really just strongly dislike it because I think it runs rampant within our culture. And I think it's debilitating. And instead of us coming together as a collective, it's tearing us apart. Anyways, that's a side note. But I think that respecting other people's decisions and their boundaries is something I find really important. I execute that within my own life, and I try to only be around people that also do the same for me. What about you, Laura? Did you have any fears about taking a break, or do you still have fears in social situations when you're with other people that are still engaging in cocktails or beer?
Well, something you said earlier was about you don't have to have a rock bottom to make the decision to. So I think, that that's a real fear. Like I think that
Mm.
people do make it an excuse to keep drinking because they haven't had a rock bottom. Well, a fear for me was, okay, well, what if I can't really
Mm.
just choose to quit, and because I'm choosing to quit right now when I don't have a rock bottom. So is that going to be motivation enough? Is that inspiration enough? And if I do pick it up back up again, what would rock bottom look like?
Yeah.
So that oddly enough was a driving fear. But then yeah, the
Mhm.
social aspect of it, of like, okay, do I label myself a sober person? How do I feel when people assert then, oh, are you an alcoholic? How does that impact
Mhm.
dating, meeting people?
Mhm.
People love to say, hey, let's go meet for a drink. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, if I don't drink, then that date's off the table. How many, people does that then eliminate? And um and then people I have relationships with that was really only about drinking, like that, because
Yeah.
it's their identity. And will we still be friends? Um
Mhm.
and a very real thing was not being fun anymore. Like, I'm not fun anymore, and I've had that fear repeated to me. Or other people feel it appropriate to give me their opinion of like, well, you're not that bad when you drink, so you don't have a problem. It's like, well, okay, you don't like,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
have power over what I do or how I do it. Like, I'm not looking for your validation to determine whether or not I should be drinking. um
Yeah.
so outside perspective is a huge influence, and that's kind of how
Mhm.
the drinking culture thrives anyway.
Yeah. I think you are spot on, and I'm really happy that you highlighted those fears because I think there are definitely things that crossed my mind, but I don't even think consciously I was like aware of them at the time. But I think that they are, and I think that there is this expectation that you know, like there's some shame I think
Mhm.
around like, oh, am I in recovery? Like, am I in recovery? And does that like what does that say about me? And like I I've never like I do know a lot of people that are in recovery, so like I don't really think too much of it. And I think it's a really brave thing for people to even pursue that and have the guts and the grit to be able to actually do it. Cause I think
Yeah.
especially if you've been in severe addiction, changing that lifestyle and like actually stopping and making all those changes you need to in order to stay sober is extremely fucking difficult. And I know a lot of people that just don't, and their life is ruined, and they're homeless and they have nothing, but they would rather be there because they have the drugs. So I always admire anyone that's willing to take the road that's for their greatest happiness and for them their greatest self. But I think that there's still this fear that like, am I going to still fit in with my friends? Am I going to still be able to go out? Am I going to still have fun? Like, are people not going to invite me out anymore because like I'm not having drinks with them? Are they going to feel judged if I'm there? And I have so many friends that are sober that I don't think too much about it, but I definitely think there's other people who are like, well, I don't want this person to come over if we're going to be doing this and they're not going to be into it, and it's like,
Mhm.
and then that's like, it's kind of a bummer. It's like, oh, okay. But then like, so I think that there can be two sides to it, but I think all of those fears are very valid and real. And I think that they are going to come up for anyone really, that's considering this. But it's like, I guess what's more important, the fear or your well-being, right?
Yeah, that's a that's our question, especially in the moment.
Yeah.
We all know you don't do peer pressure, but the rest of us mere mortals, it is a hard question to answer in the moment. So it's one to
Well,
know the answer to before you go into that situation.
yeah. And I think that's one of like the tips is like, is well, what are some things that how you can navigate these situations and prepare yourself for it is like having a set explanation of why you're not drinking and to be able to describe that to someone in like a way that you feel comfortable and like not like high and mighty about it, but like proud or like comfortable to at least describe it to someone. And so that you don't succumb to this idea of them like talking you into it or feeling less than because you don't want to. And, to say I've never fallen into peer pressure would not be accurate. I used to a lot when I was younger. And I think that that's why I'm so like, but again, if I'm in the right mindset, there's very few things I won't do. And so like that is like when I'm in that moment, I'm like, why not? Like I've said that more often than not. Stevie Durst, you know who you are. You taught me that, and he would always be like, "Why not?" And I'd be like, "I just think it's like kind of a fun philosophy for life." But I think in those moments, it's like, why not? But if I'm like, if I'm like, no, I don't want to, this is not something that I'm, I've decided I don't want to do this for these reasons, and I'm going to stand in that truth of that, then that's at least what keeps me grounded in whatever decision I've made. If I'm loosey goosey about it, that would almost be more of like, I think if someone wants to take a break, just like own the break. If you don't want to take a break and you're like battling with it and you're trying to figure out your own like balance. But whatever decision you make, I think just like hold true to it, just to for your own sanity and for your own peace of mind, so that you can feel good about whatever decision you do make when you're out in the moment too. What do you think about like or what are some other tips that you have? I know you've had a few and I really like the ones that you suggested.
Ooh, well, my favorite is always have a drink in your hand. So, is it water? Is it a Shirley Temple? Is it my favorite, soda water with lime?
Me too.
Because people aren't going to ask about getting you a drink if you already have one in your hand. So,
Mhm.
I really like that. And you already have something in your hand too, so maybe you won't feel the desire to go agree to have one or have. And another is to have your spiel ready, just like you said, like know your reason why ahead of time. Just like an HR advice is have your like elevator speech ready. Well, same with I'm not
Mhm.
drinking tonight and end of that. So I know the times where I have left social situations and felt shitty is when I can't assert and answer that question in my
Mm,
full
mhm,
power. If I hem and
mhm,
haw about it and feel like I'm arguing on behalf of my own decision, I don't feel good about that. So,
mhm,
this is a thoughtful decision that I'm making. And so that should come across either in, I'm not, and that's the end of the discussion, or if it's somebody who you want to have that conversation with, know what you want to say and how you want to represent your decision.
mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know of any others right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that covers most of the ones that I had in mind too.
Yeah.
Also like if you don't feel comfortable, don't put yourself in the situation.
Yeah.
That goes across the board. If you are struggling with it or still kind of working through the kinks of what that means for you, then I think eliminating the opportunities for you to succumb to peer pressure or to even go into a habit that you know that you'll regret, like, then, if that's what it comes down to, then just don't put yourself there. And I think that that's one of the easiest ways, but can feel really lonely and like um secluded. And so I
Mhm.
think then, but what can you handle, what can you not, and being honest with yourself about what those things are, and then adjusting your social circles, or maybe even expanding your friend group for people that don't drink and or do whatever you're trying to avoid, to be able to give you an opportunity to be around other people who also share the same values and beliefs about it,
Yeah.
because then I think it makes it feel normalizes it a little bit and makes you feel like you're not the only one. And then it gives you again a network or social support community around you, of people that can kind of encourage you and keep you on the path of whatever you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Community is important. We don't want to feel alone, and no one does. One of the first emotions that humans feel in general is empathy. And to be ostracized is literally the biggest fear of humans. And um, I think that it's easy to feel like, especially if you've built your identity around something, that if you were to remove that, then who would you be? Or if you were to lose this friend group or you want to be able to have this, then what would you have? And that's really scary. And I think that there is definitely a lot of opportunity for self discovery within that, to really parse through what's really going on and where it's coming from. And then from that, hopefully it just helps elevate you and who you are and your connection and relationship with yourself. But when you're able to do it with other people, I think it feels comforting, and it just kind of, like I started doing my month off with my partner. So it wasn't like I was doing it by myself. And it really helped me stay focused. And then I noticed the benefits of it every time after I was done. But I've also done that with like eating, like I'm not going to eat meat for like a month, because then I was like, do I have to have a burger every day? No, like I also cut out dairy at certain points, so I'm one of those people that's like always just tested myself in different ways. And that's probably because addiction runs so rampant in my family. and codependency and all the things. And so I see that, I recognize it, and I also know my own tendencies. And so I just want to be really clear with myself about what my limits are, and to be able to handle things that come up.
Yeah. Well, some resources I want to share real quick. I know you'll have some as well, but in Search of Community, there is a great group called Sober Girl Society. It is based out of the UK, but they have all sorts of participants all over the world. So there is local to you, I'm sure, groups and people to talk with, and it's just kind of fun, high girl energy, which we love. You know, I already mentioned This Naked Mind by Anna Grace. It's a great read. She also has a podcast. And then one thing I was surprised I've really leaned into is Russell Brand. His material on sobriety and mentorship has really helped me, you know, understand some of the decisions and some of the steps. And he has a book around the 12 steps. And as someone who doesn't go to AA, it's just interesting to hear his process as he's gone through it, and he has worksheets and all sorts of content on his website as well if you want to just explore your curiosity a little bit more, pen to paper.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I love Russell Brand, and I know that Dax Shepard is also very open about his sobriety and his journeys through it, and also I think, you know, if you are concerned in any way, like there is AA, there's Narcotics Anonymous, there's a lot of different resources out there. And then I think you automatically have that community around you, so that you're able to, you know, have that support. And I don't think it necessarily has to be somewhere where you're hitting a rock bottom and you go. But it's an opportunity just to hear stories, and to be able to get support and receive support. And I think in a really non-judgmental way. There's also lots of helplines out there. You know, Teen Link is a teen helpline. There's also the crisis line, which also offers services, 211, which you can type in within King County, and it'll give you resources in your area for different groups and support networks, and you know, a whole slew of it. So I think there's a lot of resources out there, and finding something that you jive with and connect with, I think, is what's most important. And again, you know, just understanding your own perspective and how you feel about it. Can be as simple as journaling about it. It could be something where you, you know, read a book, or, you know, pick up a podcast or something along those lines about it. But doing something that just feels authentic and true, and letting your intuition lead you a little bit in whatever direction that is.
Well, let's wrap this up with some love songs.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Do it, do it. Oh, wait, no, that's not the song.
What is that? Do it, do it, do it. Is that what you're thinking of? What is that? I don't even know what that song is. But obviously it's ingrained in my subconscious, because that just flowed from my lips when she said it.
Right?
It's like early 1990s hip hop. Oh,
Yeah.
but speaking of that, mine is bad. She's a bad mamma jamma. Boom, boom, boom. Just as fine as she can be. I love this song. I've always loved this song. My daughter, I put it on and she loved it and thought it was so funny. And so then after that, I added it to my playlist, and then it was also a little love song for myself. Be like, yeah, I am a bad mamma jamma, and I'm doing it. And like it like talks about, anyways, it just made me feel good about myself, and I was singing it to myself and to my daughter, and she just got a hoot. She got a kick out of it, so I thought it was fun. What's your love song this week?
Much deeper. I mean, just like more intense. I picked More Than Love by Trevor Hall. And yeah, I really enjoy that song. You know, he has a lyric in it that we're here for more than love. And I like that because I think we are here for more than love. I mean, it just seems that, you know, it's like, cool, we'll fall in love, but like, what else? What else? You know, we're here for relationships. We're here for knowledge, learning, evolution. I mean, we are here for so much more than love.
Yeah. And this is actually one of my favorite songs, and I have a signed autographed poster of the lyrics of this on my wall. And so when you brought it up, I was like, I know exactly what song you're talking about, and I love it. And one of the things was, what was it? So let's climb up at this mountain and get over all the things that has kept us in the shadows, girl. I intend to cut them out of both of our worlds. The mirror of our heart is never lies. Gotta purify our eyes and shine. And I just remember hearing that. I was like, because I think as a couple with yourself or with others, it's like there's so many things that can hinder us from really being, especially that keeps us in our shadows. So being able to cut through that, all of that, and to be able to, be resilient in the pursuit of self-reliance, self-love, and acceptance, I think is so important, and to really shine and enjoy ourselves in the pursuit of it is always the goal, to say the least. Oh, thank you, Laura, for having this conversation. I feel like this was a little bit of a heavier topic, but I think it's one that's really important, and it's definitely, there's a lot of discussion around it going on right now, and there's a lot of people that are coming out with non-alcoholic drinks, and these different and I think a lot of more people are coming out about the fact that they are sober, and that they are they just don't want it to be a part of their life anymore. And we're encouraging of whatever all of you want to pursue, but know that it's out there, and that there's resources, and that trust yourself to be able to make that decision.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ferrah, for having the conversation with me and joining me today.
Always a pleasure. And where can they find you, Laura, outside of Wild Women Wednesdays on Spotify and YouTube?
I'm on Instagram at Coach with Laura, or laurabiddle.com.
Well, I know you could also find me on Instagram, Rituals with Ferrah, or ritualswithferrah.com, to discuss my 21 Days of Rituals program, or even rituals and self-care routines, and how to establish that to create a more balanced life, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Thank you. Thanks for joining. See you guys
soon.